Lovely people, thanks for joining me once again in the Holy Shed. And here we are, back after a slight change of pace during August when, as you know, I was taking things a little bit easier. And so we had Shedlets instead. And by the way, that's not the end of Shedlets. I really enjoy Shedlets, and I'll be dropping them in now and again. So, as you may realise, I'm not actually in the shed this week. I'm in London, where, among other things, I took the funeral of a lovely 83-year-old called June, and I just had to photograph her floral tribute, or one of them, which, as you can see, is a huge Cadbury's fudge bar. Fantastic. So you will draw the conclusion that she was a bit of a fan. Absolutely. Apparently, she went through them at such a rate, her family had wholesale boxes of them sent regularly from the factory. Reminds me of my mum, who lived with us toward the end of her life and always had all kinds of chocolates and sweets tucked away in her room to give to the kids after school. Well, not just for that, she kind of enjoyed them herself too. So no wonder that the kids always went to see her first when they came in. And then after she died, Pat was, sorting through her stuff and found her latest shopping list, which consisted entirely of chocolate and sweets, including fudge bars, which is pretty great, isn't it? And, while I'm talking about lovely women, I want to give a shout out for Jean, who attends the Holy Shed every week and will be 100 on Friday. Fantastic. So, hey, Jean, have a fabulous day and a massive Holy Shed happy birthday to you. Maybe, you're the most senior Holy Shedster in the world. I don't know. People can tell me if I'm wrong about that. But what's very clear is that you're young at heart, because if you hang out here, Jean, with all of us other young at hearts, well, that's who you are. So all the very best, darling. Have a great day. So I'd like us to light a candle of Thanksgiving for Jean. If you've got one handy, you might like to light. So, hey, the Holy Shed has a new strapline. I've decided this, which is Progressive Faith for a Better World. Progressive Faith for a Better World. It's a line that I've used in connection with the soul space meditations that I do online, Zoom, regularly. And I've been using it in connection with soul space for a couple of years. But I suddenly thought, you know what? This is a perfect description of the Holy Shed too. If I want to explain what it's all about, this is it. It's about progressive faith for a better world. And I've made a small introductory video to the Holy Shed, which I'll post on YouTube maybe tomorrow, which focuses on this theme. So it'll be there, it will remain there at the top of the YouTube channel for the time being anyway. So you can, I hope, share the link of it with, friends and people to tell them about the Holy Shed. Anyway, over the next 2 or 3 weeks or so, I would like to chat a bit more about what progressive faith means. Well, what it means to me anyway. And of course, I welcome your thoughts, your questions. You can send them to me in the usual ways with Facebook messages, emails, whatever. The term progressive, yeah, it's obviously bandied about a lot now, isn't it? And it means different things probably to different people. For some, it's just a trendier way of saying that you're liberal. And, if by liberal we mean generous, open, and questioning, well, I'm not at all unhappy with that label. But I do prefer progressive because actually I believe faith should always be progressive. Faith should always be on the move, adapting to new situations, new understandings, new challenges. And that's not therefore just about being liberal. It's about being alive and present to where we are today, moving forward instead of harking back or trying to preserve intact a historic faith. Um, that's all well and good, but what is faith today in our world? And that's why I think it needs to be progressive in nature, evolving all the time. But in today's shed, I want to pause first and take a sideways look at the subject and talk a bit about the term progressive in a wider sense, because I think it's actually quite difficult to disconnect the tension between conservative and progressive Christianity from something wider, which is the so-called culture wars taking place in society in general. By culture wars, if you haven't heard the term, I'm talking about the conflict between different groups of people who hold very different opinions, values, beliefs, and practices on things like gender identity, sexuality, trans rights, racial justice, the climate crisis, and umpteen other things too. Culture wars are especially raucous and strident in the US, where the term originated. Um, but they're very much here in the UK and in other Western societies too, and they're creating quite a to-do. The increase of their usage, the usage of terms like culture wars in the media has increased massively over the last year, according to a study by King's College London, by the way. Sometimes, people who are on the more progressive side of these conflicts are labeled woke, which isn't necessarily a compliment, even though I think it's a perfectly good term. It's a term that originates in the African American community to speak of being awake, especially to the more subtle forms of racism in society. But the term has kind of, exploded beyond that context now. It's developed a wider meaning to refer to anyone who is aware of and concerned about and focused on all kinds of prejudice in society. I say that it isn't always complimentary because sometimes wokeness can come across as a new kind of puritanism, or a new fundamentalism. So, if you're not on board with things like trans rights or supportive of LGBT rights in general, or if you don't acknowledge white privilege and so on and so forth, then you are considered unenlightened, maybe not a good person, a heretic to the pure truth of wokeness. And more extremely, this results in what's known as cancel culture or call out culture, where woke people feel the need to, call out prejudice or to silence those who they see as prejudiced in the world of politics or entertainment or just life in general. So there's no tolerance for anyone with a different point of view. And actually, it's most brutally expressed, I think, in social media, where people who oppose a woke progressive agenda are, at least metaphorically, burned at the stake for their heresies. So look, let me be clear. I consider myself woke. I aspire to be woke anyway. I'm on board with pretty much all of that agenda. I want to be alive and awake to social injustices of every kind. I want to use every ounce of my energy to oppose social injustice. I hate to see people prejudiced, because of their sexuality or their gender identity or race or disability or whatever else it may be. But I'm not happy with cancelling or forcibly silencing people who take a different stance, however much I dislike disagree or deplore their views. I don't really think that's a good way to go. And I'm also not unaware that, prejudice can run both ways. So, look, hatefulness is completely unacceptable, which is why we have anti-hate laws, which need to be enforced. I think that hatred needs cancelling, silencing. But I also don't want to live in a society where people are not allowed to have different opinions, to disagree with me or with whoever else. I don't want to see the rise of a new Puritanism where dissenters of whichever side are kind of burned at the stake. I want I want to live in a world where we can have difficult and painful conversations and debates and arguments without it all descending into abuse and violence, whether that's physical or online or whatever. Now, at Greenbelt this year, I was so pleased to listen to this lovely woman. You might have seen her on Question Time and other, art programs and whatever. She's the African American writer and broadcaster, living now in this country, by the way, Bonnie Greer, who at Greenbelt was utterly wonderful. I mean, possibly my high point of the whole festival. And she spoke of the time in 2011 when she joined a panel on Question Time alongside the BNP, the British Nationalist Party leader, Nick Griffin. And I remember watching that particular edition. Beforehand, she apparently had friends tell her not to go on the show for fear of inadvertently condoning the BNP leader being given a platform on the BBC. And also, people said, why would she want to engage with such an obnoxious person anyway? So commenting on this at Greenbelt, Bonnie told us a story about her father, who was a Mississippi sharecropper at a time when a black person couldn't speak to a white person unless spoken to first. And if you did, she said you could be beaten or worse, even lynched. Black people were literally silenced, cancelled. Against that background, her dad told Bonnie, always let people speak, always let people speak. That's coming from someone who had been silenced. Always let people speak, he said, and then be a better person. Then be a better person. And that's why, she said, she would not in any way deny someone freedom of speech, no matter how abhorrent she found their views. So friends, as I say, I aspire at least to be woke, to be awake, alert and actively against social justice, because that is consistent with my vision of Jesus in the Gospels. But I also believe in freedom of speech, because I think that, wherever possible, and I know that there must be limits to freedom of speech, I know that, but wherever possible, I think it is best to oppose views and ideas I passionately disagree with by coming up with better arguments, by exposing the hideousness of prejudice and discrimination in a reasonable fashion, and by backing up words with actions. But there are, masses of beautifully woke people, some of whom are my friends, whose agenda for social justice I totally share, and who I am happy to stand alongside. People of all faiths and none who want the world to be a kinder place, who are not woke fundamentalists, but just decent human beings who know that love is the way. Love is the quality that we must always aspire to, not hatred. And you know what? I actually can't imagine how it can possibly be progressive to forcibly silence people. That just doesn't seem to fit to me, to burn them at the stake on social media, dehumanize them, even if I think their views are dehumanizing. All I succeed in doing is to dehumanize myself in the process, and that's not who I want to be. That's not the world I want to live in. St. Paul said, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So when I turn from all of this to the question, what is progressive faith? I think that love must always be central to that. Love is the most progressive force in the world. Love, even towards those with whom we passionately disagree. And by love, I don't mean, having pink, fluffy feelings toward these people. I mean what Jesus said, treating them the way I wish to be treated. That's love. By listening to them and granting them respect as fellow human beings, which they may not deserve. But it also means taking them on, arguing passionately for what I believe is right and good and not just simply being passive about it. I felt proud to be a trustee at Greenbelt this year um, when I listened to Richard Dawkins on the main stage in conversation with Giles Fraser. I don't know any other Christian event that would give Britain's, possibly the world's, most renowned atheist that kind of space. And you know what? I came away feeling that I liked Richard Dawkins more than I thought that I did beforehand, simply by listening to him and sensing his humanity instead of, just going along with the caricatures of him, listening to the echo chambers of Auntie Dawkins. Now, look, there's no doubt that Richard Dawkins is something of an atheist fundamentalist, but I caught glimpse of more shades of grey in him than I had expected, and I do wish that the conversation had teased out these grey areas more instead of, in a cat and mouse style, rehearsing all the well-worn metaphysical arguments that were never really going to get us anywhere or reveal anything new. There's an awful lot to argue with Richard Dawkins about, but from my perspective, the least interesting of these is his atheism, in which, frankly, I do have sympathies. I've sympathized with his logic while disagreeing with his conclusions. There's, mostly more common ground to explore with people like Richard Dawkins than we're often led to believe. Anyway, well done, Greenbelt, I say, for hosting the conversation, for not cancelling Richard Dawkins, despite him having beliefs and opinions that we may passionately disagree with. I guess the challenging question, for each of us is, who are we cancelling, if anyone? Who are we not prepared to entertain or engage with or listen to? Actually, I think that some of the more difficult conversations are with people who are not a million miles away from us, maybe conservative and fundamentalist Christians. I think it's hard, not least because, this is where many of us have come from ourselves. Often we're less charitable, therefore, toward them, less tolerant of their beliefs than others who, are completely different to us. What I'm saying is that I don't think we can consider ourselves as progressive by creating a new form of certainty. Because after all, progressive certainty is basically certainty. And that's surely what progressiveness tries to move away from. It seems pretty clear to me that progressive faith is not unrelated to these wider trends of progressiveness in society that I've talked about. But then, I'm more than happy to recognize God's Spirit at work beyond the church in society in general. I believe that wherever we see trends or activities or social movements toward justice, peace, or compassion in the world, that there we are engaging with and witnessing the impulses of God's Spirit, regardless of whether the people pursuing these things are people of faith or not. So all of this is just to open up the subject of progressive faith, which we will be thinking about much more specifically in the next couple of weeks. So if you have questions about that, do send them in to me so I can include that in. And also, what I'm saying today is by way of underscoring that progressive self-righteousness is no better than any other kind of self-righteousness. We're all pilgrims on a journey looking for truth. And what we must at all costs resist is saying that we've got the truth and the rest haven't, because I think that is a distinctly unprogressive, unchristian, unchristlike way of going about life. So here is a prayer. Loving God of all creation, may we distrust every way that excludes fellow travellers who happen to see things differently to us. May we distrust every claim to truth where truth is not wedded to love. May we distrust every choice that does not bring us more fully alive to ourselves, to others, and to you. Amen. Okay, well, I want to toast to that. So if you have a drink handy, I invite you to join me now in a little toast. A toast to a better world, a world where, where there's room for everyone, where people who are marginalized find themselves at the center, where people, uh, are drawn in rather than excluded. I want to toast a world where injustices are seen for what they are and we can move on from them. I'd like to toast a kinder, more peaceful, more inclusive world. A toast to forms of faith in all traditions that place the golden rule at the center of their life, loving others as we would wish to be loved. A toast to all those forms of faith where, we can fearlessly affirm who we are, but courageously defend the faith of others too. So, oh yeah, and a taste to disagreeing amicably. Here you go, guys. To life. L'chaim. Oh gosh, catching my breath again. If you like what I'm doing here in the Holy Shed, you can support us by buying us a coffee or two. The link is on your screen now, and it's always at the top of the posts on the Holy Shed Facebook page. Thank you so much for supporting us in this way, those of you who do, or in other ways, with words of encouragement, with your prayers, with your good wishes, and so on and so forth. We are very grateful for all of that. And here's, well, it's a kind of a blessing, really, to finish off with that I wrote earlier. God help me, God help us to be charitable toward those who hold different views to us, seeking a common humanity. God help us to be true to our convictions, regardless of their popularity or disapproval, and yet always open to change our mind. God help us to learn that being kind and loving is the highest expression of faith in any tradition, that actions always speak louder than words. Amen. And well, that's just about it for now, guys. I'm going to finish off in a moment with a song by Eric Bibb called "I Shall Not Be Moved." It's not a highly polished version. It's him and his mate, rather wonderfully, having a rehearsal on Easter Day of the song "I Shall Not Be Moved," because I think we've all got to find that place where, we're open to change, and yet we can't be moved from the things that are essential, which is actually, for me, about love and kindness and goodness. So enjoy the song, enjoy your week. Be kind to people around you, be kind to yourselves, stay human, and we'll meet again very soon. Hope you enjoy this. It's good fun.